We begin with breaking news from Ukraine. Lviv, the city that had been seen as a safe haven, is coming under new airstrikes. This is video just into us from our CBC News team. That is the aftermath of one of the missile strikes on the city this morning. Lviv's mayor says at least 6 people are dead and 11 wounded, including a child. Lviv is in western Ukraine. Millions of refugees have moved through the city to escape the fighting, and hundreds of thousands still take shelter there. Let's go live now to the scene in Lviv. Katie Simpson joins us from one of the missile strikes. Katie, good to see you. Tell us what you're seeing on the ground today.
Lviv's mayor confirmed that 4 missiles struck Lviv. 3 of them were unoccupied military targets. That's what they're saying. And then another was a civilian target, and that's where we are right now. I'm going to take a step out of the way right here. This is what was an auto body shop and a place that sold tires. You can see firefighters are here. They're taking debris out of the top of the building, and they're throwing it out onto the ground. That's been going on for a couple of hours. It's taken emergency crews a couple of hours to put out the fire. When we first arrived, this building was mostly engulfed in flame. Huge plumes of smoke were coming out, and you can see the charred remains of what happened here. So we've got firefighters, emergency workers up in the roof of this building. They're throwing tires and other pieces of debris over there. When we first got here, that part of the building actually did have a roof, but they've been removing it as the afternoon now has carried on. We've also seen members of the military here. It's believed they're being a part of the investigation to get more details as to what exactly happened in this specific attack. And then as we look further across the scene here, there's a big divot in the ground there where it looks like there's an impact right there. So we're waiting for specifics about the injuries at this location. As you mentioned, the numbers are changing as the day goes on. We heard from the mayor talking about how this is a civilian target. This is where people would bring their cars. A number of cars have been damaged as well. When we first got here, the air raid sirens actually started ringing again, and there were a number of journalists here, and the press officer who was here actually made us sort of leave the scene and ushered us back into an alleyway where there are a number of townhouses. And we spoke with a young man who heard the explosions this morning. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and he said he heard the air raid sirens, and then he heard 2 explosions, he says. And this is western Ukraine. This has not been a place that's been targeted the same way that we've seen attacks in the east and the south. And so he said to us, when those air raid sirens went off, he wouldn't necessarily take them seriously. But then he heard the explosions, and in the panic, he says he panicked, and then he didn't know where to go, where the air raid shelter was, or the bomb shelter was. And so he said moving forward, he will pay attention to those air raid sirens and take them more seriously. So western Ukraine has been that hub, a safer hub, where refugees, people who've been fleeing the violence in the east and the south, have been coming here. And now with with these 4 different attacks today, it's certainly going to change the feeling here, especially with the damage that we're seeing behind me. You know, we're staying in Lviv. We've been stationed here through our deployment. And it was about 8 o'clock when those air raid sirens went off. We were still at the hotel about to start our day. When I was in my hotel room and I could feel the ground shake, my bed shook. I texted our security advisor to see if anyone had heard anything or seen anything. And he went to check out the roof. We went to look at the windows and the balconies, and that's when we first saw the plumes of smoke and knew that this air raid siren wasn't just another air raid siren, because again, air raid sirens happen often enough, and people don't necessarily go to the shelters the way they have in other parts of Ukraine. But again, that is certainly going to change when you take a look at the aftermath of what's behind me right there.
Katie, we're so fortunate to have you there on the ground, and I can only imagine how terrifying that must have been when your bed was shaking this morning. How do you expect that this attack, as you say, in a city where people have been seeking safe haven, it has not been as much of a target as other parts of Ukraine, how do you expect that these blasts overnight are going to rattle nerves for yourself and everyone else who's there?
Well, the bed was just shaking a little bit, and other people didn't notice it. I was reading my phone, I was reading news about to get the day started, and I felt it, and I texted other people to see if they felt it too, to see if it was just me, and maybe it was nothing. But certainly this has been a place where This is where people who are fleeing more violent places come to stay. Much of this city has transformed. And when you walk around here, Lviv, the city streets, restaurants are busy. People are in the pedestrian ways. They're out in the parks. Kids are playing out. We've seen lots of kids out skateboarding and rollerblading and playing in the parks. We even saw pony rides yesterday. So even though life continues here, when you scratch just below that surface, just beneath that surface, people here are incredibly anxious. They are terrified. And many people have fled traumatic experiences, again, in the south and the east. And that is a big concern, that every time those air raid sirens go off, it is a horrific, traumatic experience, because they're brought right back to the violence that they experienced in their hometowns and their home cities. And they came here for that. Yesterday, we were talking yesterday on the air, and we went to a church service to sort of talk to people to see how they're feeling. And we spoke about this yesterday. We interviewed an older gentleman. He's 59 years old, and we asked the question, how are you feeling? And it just took about 10 seconds of him responding before tears just rolled down his cheeks. This is an entire city, even though it has been safer than other places, understandably, everyone is on edge here, and what's happened here this morning is certainly going to just add to that.
Katie, as always, thank you so much for taking us right to the scene. Stay well. Katie Simpson in Lviv, Ukraine.